Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebell. I'm Jeremiah Whalen, and that laughing guy is Roger Parks. And in today's episode, we're going to answer a question we got. And first question is, Roger, how you doing?
Depends.
On?
Haven't decided yet.
Okay. Well, then say that. Don't say it depends. Because you clearly know. Well, whatever it depends on, hopefully we resolve that today. Do you want to get into this question?
What question?
This one.
Okay.
Okay. All right, here it is. We got this question. It says, I've hit a wall with my press, and everyone tells me just keep adding volume or go heavier. Strange advice. But I'm in my late 40s and grinding through that advice keeps beating up my shoulder. Is there any specific way to break a press plateau that doesn't wreck me in the process?
Probably.
There definitely is.
No,
it's called swinging.
Not definitely.
Okay.
There probably is. I mean, well,
I'm living in absolutes right now, Roger. Accept me for who I am.
There is such a thing as capped genetic potential. Maybe there's an anatomical constraint that you just can't clear up. It's not likely, but I'm just, don't talk in absolutes.
So this capped genetic word you're throwing around, you have to clarify what that means for some less educated folks like myself who haven't
just meaning there's a cap to the ability that you can do genetically. Like maybe you just can't go farther than that.
I love that. We all learned something here today. So if you're listening to this, your capped genetic possibilities have risen. Did I use that right?
No, it's not one word. Cap to genetic, 3 words.
Oh. Well, that makes more sense. I thought it was one word. I was like, what?
You thought I was
we made up a word for
stuff.
You, and I'm famous for that. So.
Okay. No, it's all right. 3 words. Cap to genetic potential. Mm-hmm. Anyway,
right.
Moving on. So let's assume that is not the case. And let's also assume that we can help this person. So let's try.
Okay.
First thing we want to do is we do want to look at, we want to look at mobility constraints. We want to look at pain. We want to look at anything that we could do to make that shoulder happier. Sometimes the shoulder is as good as it's going to get, and a certain amount of volume will make it grouchy. That's just the way it is. There's no way around that. But sometimes you can, do some mobility work and get things moving a little bit better. Maybe strengthen something. Who knows? There are some options there, but that would be the first thing to do is honestly assess what is the quality of your shoulders, because what if more volume or more load is exactly the right way to move forward, and you can't do that because your shoulders are torn up. So that's going to be the first thing you're going to do. Honest assessment there. Once we get that out of the way, let's say that the shoulder is fine. It's working as well as it's going to. Then there are really 2 things that stand out right away. One is whatever you're doing, do something else. Oh. Don't continue to do the same thing if it's not working. Clearly something's off.
What is that? The definition of insanity, Roger?
I hear that quote is often misattributed to him. So I don't.
And that
I don't
him
know.
is Einstein.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I have heard that, and I don't know what the definition of insanity is. But anyway, clearly we have evidence, right? What you're doing isn't working. Stop doing it. Do something else. I think we've done an episode on this, and there is definitely some value to novel stimulus. Sometimes you need something a little different. So something's got to change. Now, ideally, the thing should change in line with, whatever your limiting factor is. That's really what we're talking about here. We've got to figure out what the limiting factor is. What's getting in your way from making progress, and that's what we want to do. So those are going to be the 2 things combined. Think to yourself, okay, Is it truly a strength deficit? Strength deficit? Is it an endurance deficit? Are you just can't get any stronger? Or if I had better endurance, could I train longer or better? Is it a mobility thing? Is it a midsection thing? You and I worked, for example, with your stance, and it was a technical thing. That was the thing that made the biggest difference. And there were some other workouts and, exercises that we tried that were helpful. But I'd say the thing that got you the most progress was a slight change to your stance, which is a technical thing. So, the goal is twofold in this case. You want to figure out what the limiting factor is, see, and those are going to be some categories, muscular strength, muscular endurance, pain, mobility. Is it a technical thing? Do you really understand, could you improve your press by gripping the bell better, by cleaning the bell better, by standing in a different way? When you are doing your press, are you leaning too far to the front, the back, the side, whatever? These are all technical flaws. Is there too big of a pause between your clean and your press? Are you not breathing well? So, these are some things that you're going to want to think about. And why we want to think about those things is we want to have whatever novel stimuli you pick, meaning, different workout focusing on different things. We want to have the new stuff focus on that thing that you need. That would be the ideal situation. That you with me so far?
Yeah. And I actually was curious, of those things, is there like a hierarchy in which you should choose, or just pick one and go with it?
I do think there is. I think that, the first, if you're going to go through, a sort of algorithm, like, we talked about with the last episode, for me, the thing that I always go through first is pain. We've got to figure that out. If there's pain, or things just aren't working, you're going to get inhibition somewhere. Your body's not going to work as well as it should. That, unfortunately, is about all we can really say there, because it's such a complex topic that we couldn't do it justice. And this really is not our strong suit. This is not what we do. Yeah. This is not what we're talking about.
Just rub some dirt on it.
Yeah, walk it off. So clear that up. But then after that, I do think that there's a hierarchy, and I think that we have to get into the technical first. I think we need to make sure that the lift itself is functioning well, because that's where we get into things like balance. So, balance, I think, is so important for a lift. Is it makes the nervous system feel safe or not, and safety is going to be. Often people have the physical strength to do something, but their nervous systems inhibit them somehow because it doesn't feel safe. So I would go after the mobility pain stuff, or pain, then mobility. And then I would go after the technical stuff first. Make sure those things are solid, because the technical things are usually going to clear up things that have to do with balance and that may make you feel unsettled. And if your nervous system doesn't feel safe, you're not going to get the same strength output. So that alone is often enough to make you progress. And at the same time, when you focus on the physics of the lift, which is really what technique comes down to, it's not just about making yourself more safe or feel more safe. It's about making yourself more efficient. So whatever force that you are generating, maybe it makes it to the bell in a better way, in a more meaningful way. And suddenly you have a lift that goes up, whereas before it didn't. And then after that, you have some options, physically. Do you think that your problem with your training is a lack of endurance, or do you think it's a lack of peak strength? And then you can start, programming from there. So those are kind of the, you start with the pain and mobility, you get into the technical stuff, and then you get into the specific muscle adaptation. And then there's one other thing too, but let's not move on from this just yet.
Okay.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is one other thing I think we can talk about, and that is recovery. And that may have an equal input, just like technique does. Often what people will do is they're lifting too heavy, or they're lifting with too much volume, or they're not adequately recovered. And I know we've done episodes on that.
Yeah.
The overall systemic recovery that you require to get stronger. And again, we talked about this triangle of things that you need at least to get stronger. You need the sufficient stimulus, you need sufficient nutrition, and you need sufficient recovery. Without those three things, you're not going to gain the size, the strength, whatever it is you want. If you don't have adequate recovery, or if, let's say, life is getting in the way, maybe you give yourself plenty of recovery from exercise and you're not overdoing it, but you're just going through a really rough patch personally, you may be under recovered, and that is enough to keep you stalled. It could be a dietary thing, it could be a sleep thing. So you want to kind of clean those things up the best you can. But another thing that people don't really talk about or use because they don't think they need it is this idea of a deload. Are you familiar with you're familiar with the concept? But
yeah, it's like, is it where you've worked to a certain point, obviously, probably like maybe where you're at a plateau, and then you take and reduce sets, reps, and weight and all that stuff, but still continue in sort of your regular training schedule where it's less at that point? Is that basically what we're talking about?
That's basically what we're at. But my understanding is that we want to do a deload before we hit a plateau. Plateau is, from my understanding, is we're stuck. We don't want to get stuck. So let's say we're doing our press work and, we're grinding away. We're feeling pretty good. What people want to keep going and doing is because they're greedy. They, oh, I did this. Let me go up a bell size. Let me add, when you do the math, I've had people, do 500% jumps in one workout. Like, oh, you don't feel good after? Huh? Who knew? So, people do get greedy, but a deload it's designed to come after a period of work. When you're doing the work, often the end result of that work is you're feeling a little tired. You might feel a little, maybe not quite beat up. Kettlebells are not supposed to do that, but you don't feel as strong as possible. When you are exposed to a stimulus, a training stimulus, the initial response is not going to be, in most cases, I'm stronger. It's going to be, I'm weaker. If you just think about this with through the lens of common sense, if you're doing a workout, right? Are you going to go, you're a fighter. Are you going to have a fight after a big workout?
Not ideally. That would not work out so right? Great.
You're weaker, you're tired, you've expended your physical resources. So we want to keep in mind that while you're doing the work, while you're doing the hard training, you are often below your peak capacity because your body's trying to adapt to it. So a deload diminishes the amount that you lift. It diminishes the volume. It can work in a few different ways. But what it does is it allows the stimulus to continue. It doesn't just drop it off out of nowhere. It allows the stimulus to continue while your body can absorb the progress, and you can really start to feel that, oh, I am getting stronger. And this is important to, in a sense, consolidate. It's like you've got this long chaotic meeting, and then you've got this wrap up that kind of summarizes everything together. It's like, oh, this is what we've been talking about for an hour and a half. So that deload,
so skip the meeting.
the deload is a lower load, whether it be, the actual volume, the intensity, the weight, whatever it is, in order to allow your body to adapt. And sometimes we need things like that because the work we've done may not have the ability to stick. If we don't have a meaningful deload at some point, then what can happen is we keep pushing until we get frustrated or until we overwork, and then the body's just exhausted. So
or
you don't
the
even have
injury
the
pops up or something.
Exactly. So you don't even have the opportunity to push and say, oh, well, am I really making progress or not? When you go into some kind of powerlifting meet or some sort of strength event, you don't work really, really hard all the way up to the minute. You don't want to peak right then and there, but peaking usually comes after a back off. So you work really, really hard. You minimize the volume, you minimize the loads. If you're going to a powerlifting meet, why so many people hit a PR at a powerlifting meet is because you've done all the hard work. You back off a little bit. You don't completely abandon the stimulus, because then your body and brain like, what is this? But you're not doing, some people might, and I'm just trying to illustrate this conceptually. But generally speaking, you're not doing what would be your hardest lift before the meet. You're saving it for the meet.
Mm-hmm.
And that period between the work you do and the taper or the back off is allowing your body to rest a little bit. And then once you go into the meet, that's when all of your strength gains have kind of solidified, and you lift more than you've ever lifted before. So it's there could be other aspects too. There could be a social aspect or adrenaline, whatever. But the point is, there's a very viable mechanism in the backing off before the meet, because it allows all the hard work to solidify. Now you're stronger than you were before. And people don't often take that into account in their training. So they focus on, when we look at that one triangle, that triangle idea again, they focus on the stimulus. They don't focus on the recovery, or they don't focus on the nutrition. And, that's something that you want to get set, and you want to figure that out rather than just, grinding through. Let me take these other factors seriously. And am I programming a deload? And it could be just for me, my deloads are, I change the type of exercise I do.
Yeah. And it's, and this person, they said they're in their 40s. So it's also, you should at this point, hopefully realize that you can have some patience with this whole process. And if you are trying to train like you're in your 20s, and even if you're in your 20s and listening to this, yes, you should still have the deload, but the recovery time is going to be greater in your 40s, at least in my experience in my 40s. It's so common with things like event focus. You mentioned the powerlifting meet and stuff like that, but if you're just training in general and whatever your goal is, if it's like, I just want to be stronger or what, some obligatory goal, you're going to have to use critical thinking, I guess, at this point then, and say, I'm going to have to put this in like every 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever the case may be. I don't know what the interval is, but that's why you hire somebody like us to set that up for you. But with the marathon running and stuff like that, or any sort of running race, that's a common occurrence. And people look forward to that because you've worked so hard, and they're like, oh, good, I get like a week and a half sort of break before this big event or this powerlifting meet or these sort of things. And it reminds me of the last certification that we did together where I had to do the half body weight press. And I recall calling you from a place, I was at a gym and I pressed a 44 kilo, and we were still 2 weeks out from this certification. And you're like, you're being a dumbass. You're peaking too soon. And I was like, no, I think I got this. And sure enough, of course, I got there, and at the time, I eventually did do it at the event, but not in the moment when I was wanting to do it, and
and it was a lot harder than it should have been.
Oh, way harder, because when I did it at the gym, following my program, I just ill-timed it, obviously, because I think there was naturally in that program, however I designed it, I think there was like a bit of enough of a taper, so to speak, where I was like able to come back at whatever day of that week that was and do it. And it was like no big deal. I was like, oh, I've got this now. It is my new thing. I should press this every time, as we also know and mentioned in other episodes.
And to be clear, that was the real problem. It's, every now and then when you're doing really well on a program, you might hit a weight that you weren't expecting to hit. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But then when you get greedy and you treat this as your new max, and you start go, oh, I should press this every time. That's where the problem comes in.
Yeah. And we did talk about in another episode, I think we used the bench press as an example, where you're like, oh, now I bench press my new max of 150, for huge weights.
Every time. That's my new max.
Every time. So I start at 150. Now I should be at 155 on my second set and this sort of thing. And that just doesn't work out in real life.
No, I mean, look, well, let's potentially, moving up in small increments can, but you have to adjust something else. So let's not open that can of worms.
Is 150 really my bench max?
One thing though, I do want to point out before we wrap this up is this idea of a deload. You have to earn a deload with training. I have several clients that I don't use deloads for because life tends to do that naturally. Schedules get busy, holidays come up, kids get sick. There's a natural a natural reduction in their training based on life. So, sometimes we need to do that, and I do switch up the stimulus and things like that. But for people listening to this, don't think, oh, I need a deload week. Like, okay, you're already being lazy. You're already doing, 50% of what you should be doing. Don't think you've earned a deload week, because maybe you haven't. If you're training, if you're following a program, if you're being systematic, if you've been working at it pretty hard for a while, then sure, you've earned something. Give yourself a week or two of at a lighter load, less stimulus, and then move on to a different type of training. That's totally cool. But some people don't need to do that, and it really depends on how hard you've been working, and more importantly, how consistently you've been working.
So don't be greedy and don't be lazy. So find that middle ground, Goldilocks.
And I think there's one other thing for the press goal that I do want to talk about, and I give this advice to people pretty frequently, especially other coaches. Don't be afraid to do something else to express strength that you might be a little better at. My go-to move usually is the deadlift. And when you get the functional training people and you get the sports specific people, they tell me it's not going to work. Okay, well, it's worked every time I've used it.
It worked for me.
Worked every time I've suggested it. Strength is neurological and it's systemic. So I understand that you are not pushing your arms over your head when you deadlift. And I also understand that you might think that whatever you do needs to look like the thing that you're trying to do. But let's just save everyone some time. I'm right and you are wrong. So use an alternative stimulus when possible. Squatting, deadlifting, stuff where you can, even carries with heavy kettlebells. These things will carry over, and they will make you stronger without beating up your shoulders. Another thing I like to do is, some people call them cheat cleans. I call them 2-hand cleans. I'll do that with a bigger bell and get, if I'm trying to, let's say you're trying to press a 40, use a 44. Get that added
into the rack and get used to that sort of weight on your body. And
do some 2-hand cleans. And, when you do get to the bell, you're intending to press, it's going to feel lighter and you're going to feel comfortable with it. You're going to feel, it's not going to be a shock or a surprise. So don't be afraid to do, other stimulus. And, sometimes people are good if they've got a lot of endurance with their shoulders, which doesn't sound like this is the case we're talking about. Sometimes bench press is an acceptable stimulus as well. But for this particular goal, I like using something with the legs, and I do like using the deadlift. And why I like using the deadlift is you are increasing the neurological drive. Okay. When you lift heavy, a 200-pound deadlift is not a heavy deadlift for an adult male in most cases. So if you're doing a 200-pound deadlift, it's not heavy. However, it's going to be probably twice as heavy as any kettlebell that you're going to try to lift.
Oh, 40 for sure, right?
So we're getting more neurological stimulus. We're getting more neurological stimulus, but we're not taxing the shoulders directly. You also need to understand how, proper force transmission works. There's a lot of linking in the deadlift of the bar to your body, and that's where your lats are going to come in. And that is something you also need for your press. You need to be solid to connect the upper body to the lower body. Even though you are pressing with your arm, it's a total body thing.
Yeah, and that deadlift thing works every time, or at least for me, in that when I've experienced it, and we've done it together nearly every time like that. But yeah, it does bring into that whole body tension and that feeling of connectedness that you need. And then, so what we did, and I don't know if this is what you recommend, but let's say, you go in, we used the trap bar the last time and we put, I don't know, I think 315 on it or something like that. And the goal was pressing the 44 kilo. We did the 315 and I pressed the 44 and I was like, this feels incredibly light. And it just was like, oh, this is an ease. We gave it a little rest. We did it again. And then I pressed it twice. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is like the greatest pressing day of my life. And I haven't pressed since, just so I don't ruin it. No, I'm just kidding on that. But
that's a specific technique. And I could be getting this wrong, but I don't think I am. I think the idea there is something called post-activation potentiation. So that's where these are the big words.
Oh yes,
it really is.
What was the other? What was the other one? I already forgot.
Captogenetic.
Captogenetic. That's what I'm gonna call this episode.
But the post-activation potentiation idea is you do something heavy that ideally doesn't compete with something else that you're about to do, and your nervous system takes notice, your muscles fire, you're ready to go. And in that case, you're more ready for this other weight, and it's going to feel a little bit lighter. And you can do something similar to with sometimes you can even do swings rather than a heavy load. You can move in intent with intent, or increase the intensity, and that's also helpful sometimes. So that's slightly different. I'm talking about using that is definitely a valid technique, but I'm talking about using a deadlift as a
separate
staple
session.
in your training. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Like a staple in your training. Like, okay. Maybe if there's one thing to take from this, if you can deadlift or you can squat, just try it. Try something new, and let's assume that you're going to do all the other stuff you need to do, but let's throw a deadlift into your program for a while, and then do your pressing sparingly. Don't forget it. If that's the goal, then you don't want to completely abandon the stimulus, but drop the volume down, drop the load down temporarily. And focus on some other stuff to get strong. That works a lot of the time.
All right. So with all that, you should be able to press your ass off. Right, Roger?
You should. And if we get specific, examples, you send us a video.
Yeah. Yeah, send the videos, send the questions. As you can see, we'll answer them. And this was just one question that we received, and we want to hear from you and help you. So put those in the comments. Send them to us via direct message. You know where we're at, the Iron Revival, everywhere. And be sure to download the Bells app, where you can get plenty of press workouts, deloads included. Okay? I promise. Anything else, Roger?
Nope.
All right, cool. Stay strong, everybody, and thanks for listening.